Hey everyone, it's Nicole Spohr here today for Mama Elephant, and I'm so excited to be sharing the Cherry Blossom Branch 3 Ways video with you. This features the November 2019 stamp and die set called Cherry Blossom Branch. And I used it in a very similar way on 3 cards using 3 different coloring mediums. And I just wanted to show the versatility and beauty of this stamp set. I absolutely love it. We're going to start with some Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers and a water brush pen for the first card, plus an inked background. On a scrap of Bristol Smooth cardstock, I am going to take images from the Cherry Blossom Branch set and stamp these with clear embossing ink and heat emboss with white embossing powder. This is my favorite go-to kind of cheater, I call it a cheater way of watercolor. You guys probably know, if you follow me already, that I am a huge fan of Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers on Bristol Smooth cardstock. It is a game changer. No matter if you're doing no line coloring, regular coloring, or this kind of faux watercolor coloring, this is my go-to paper when using these markers. Now, because I'm stamping and embossing, I am using a powder tool first to protect and keep that embossing powder only on the stamped areas, so it hopefully doesn't migrate anywhere else. This is especially important because this is kind of a smaller image than what I normally do this technique with. However, I was super happy with how it turned out. So once I have the embossing powder, I'm going to heat set these images, and then we're going to color them in with some Zig markers and a water brush pen for that faux watercolor effect. Now, my favorite thing about this card is probably not only the colors I chose, because I really did love the colors I chose, and we'll talk about that when I start coloring here in a minute, because they are not on my favorites list. And sometimes it's great to have some of those colors that you might not gravitate towards, because I think for cherry blossoms, these are fantastic. But my favorite thing is the blue background. I think it really makes these images pop. So I'm going to zoom in a little closer so that hopefully you can see what I'm doing close up. I am laying down my dark color, which is Pink Flamingo, blending out with Tea Rose just a teeny tiny bit, and then taking a water brush pen that has water in it and pulling that color the rest of the way out on the petals. Now, I think when we get started, super hard to see. The more of these flowers that I get colored, the more you will see just how fantastic this effect is. It's so super pretty. And then of course, when it's white embossing on white cardstock, hard to see, and hard to see that definition. When we die cut these images and then pop it against the aqua background, it really makes these pop. If you want to stamp these directly on cardstock, kind of similar to the next card I'm going to share with you where I didn't use the dies, you could always position them right where you want them to go, stamp them, emboss them, color them in, add some color to your background with even I would probably do a blue again, or even a light gray would be really pretty, as you'll see with the light gray backgrounds I used for my other 2 cards. Something like that, and color in with your water brush pen and a little bit of ink, whatever that might be, and you can do a 1-layer card very easily with this same technique. Now, any of the smaller buds, because the cherry blossom branch is very flower heavy, meaning there's not going to be a whole lot of greenery. There's some very teeny tiny leaves along there, and they definitely add a great little pop of color, but I'm not super concerned with making sure that I add lots of greenery. The color all comes from the cherry blossoms. So those little buds, I'm actually using light carmine on those, which is slightly darker than Pink Flamingo and Tea Rose. And that little bit of difference really makes a huge impact on the branch, gives you a little bit of 2 colors. Speaking of the leaves, those were colored with light green and yellow green, which is a go-to color combination. And because the branch is so teeny tiny and there's not a ton of it to color, I used mid-brown, and I did not blend it out with a water brush pen. I didn't want it leaking outside of the line. And I am quickly, well, I guess I did use a water brush pen a little bit, but I mostly did not use it because I just really wanted to make sure I did not bleed outside of there. That goes for the leaves as well. If there's any teeny tiny leaves, I'm just not going to use the water brush pen for that. I worked my way slowly, I started in one area and went up, and then I'm going to work out from there. And that's going to just fill in this beautiful branch. In addition to the branch, we're going to stamp and emboss several leaves from the stamp set and a couple of the individual flowers. Another thing about the cards I'm sharing today, all three of them only feature one stamp and die set. So there isn't, mixing and matching and having to find another set with sentiments or anything like that. Economically wise, definitely a little bit cheaper that way. You can use the coloring mediums you have at home. You can use any colors. I did try to pick colors that I thought looked a little bit more like cherry blossoms, but you guys definitely don't have to do that. Isn't it so pretty? I just love watching it come to life. This is one of my favorite relaxing coloring techniques, is the zigs with a water brush pen for this faux watercolor effect. I think it's gorgeous and really, really pretty. And just a great way to add color to images. Especially if you're like me and not super confident in watercoloring, I think this is a great way to kind of get that look without actually having to watercolor. And the embossed area helps hold the color within that line a little bit more than just a stamped image that you're trying to watercolor. So it's a great starter platform for if you want to get started with a watercoloring effect or look and don't want to have to spend tons of time or maybe waste a lot of paper, which I have definitely done many, many times. We're going to finish this last little grouping, do our individual flowers, and die cut everything with the coordinating cherry blossom branch dies. In the stamp and die set, so the dies that coordinate, there are dies for the branch, the individual flowers, and all the individual petals. I love that because it means that you can stamp and die cut every image in this set and do all kinds of amazing things with them. So really great die collection here. Before you do die cut these images, I would suggest letting the water completely dry or hitting it very quickly with a heat tool to set that color, as you don't want it to, if it's still wet, you don't want it to smash out and maybe ruin your paper or your image when you die cut it. So do make sure that it is completely dry before running it through your machine. And as I add a little color to these individual petals and flowers, hopefully you can see those images a little bit more too. And I do this quickly. I lay down my color, we'll blend out with a little bit darker color, or a lighter color, pardon me, and then take our water brush pen. I did use mostly the light carmine in the center of any of the flowers to darken it up a little bit. Now for the background of our card, I mentioned that I really wanted my cherry blossoms to pop, and probably my favorite go-to background color is aqua. I love how florals especially look against it, whatever color the florals might be, but these cherry blossoms really pop off of an aqua background. And one of my favorite aqua colors currently is the Hero Hues Pool Party Reactive Ink. It is gorgeous and it will react with water, however that's not applicable today. We're not going to be doing any spritzing with water or anything like that, but it will. I'm taking a panel of smooth white cardstock. This isn't Bristol, it's just regular Nina smooth white cardstock. I think it's just the 80-pound weight. And I am inking it up using a blending brush and this Hero Hues Pool Party Reactive Ink, doing an ombre effect where it's much darker down near the bottom and lightens gradually as you get to the top of the panel. I know it looks kind of minty green on camera, but in real life and in the photo, it's definitely more of that pool party aqua. Once that ink is completely dry, we're going to take our sentiments from the Cherry Blossom Branch stamp set and stamp them in the lower right corner of the card. Using a clear embossing ink and heat embossing on this card with white embossing powder. I wanted to keep it really consistent with the white embossing, so we have our white embossed images and white embossed sentiments. In the stamp set, there's the scripty Just a Note greeting that's larger than the other phrases. The rest of the phrases, there are 4 different ones, and you can use those for whatever card. This first one is a sympathy style card, which is always great to have on hand, so you're not having to make them at the time they're needed. I'm a big proponent of having these kinds of cards on hand when emotions aren't running so high. Then I'm going to completely back my branch with foam adhesive squares. I'm using both large and small, and then I'm going to pop that onto my card background. That little bit of dimension really makes the floral cherry blossom branch shine. We'll also adhere the 2 individual flowers down along the bottom edge with foam adhesive. We've got a scattering of petals. Some will be adhered with liquid glue and some will be adhered with additional foam adhesive around the card design, and I'm going to play along with that. I want the petals to look like they're falling from the branch down to the ground below. You might notice that several of the images, including the end of the branch and a couple of the edges of my florals, hang off the edge. This is on purpose to help ground the images so it doesn't feel like everything is just floating out there in outer space. When the glue is dry, I will trim away any of that excess paper hanging off the edge before adhering this to a white side fold card base. This card base measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, so it goes side to side, top to bottom. There's no border around the edges. Isn't that so pretty against that aqua background? Finally, the only embellishment I'm going to add to the card design is some Nuvo Crystal Drops in Morning Dew. They're going to be looking like dewdrops scattered throughout the card. I love this on floral card designs as it adds just a fun little touch that doesn't overwhelm the rest of the design of the card. I'll let these dry completely while I work on my next card design. My next card is going to feature some Polychromos colored pencils. I also absolutely love my colored pencils. They have been my favorite coloring medium for many, many years. They were my first coloring medium that I really felt comfortable with, and I used Prismacolors at that time. And I still use those, but I also absolutely adore Polychromos, especially on a colored cardstock like this. This Lawn Fawn Fog cardstock is my other favorite go-to background color. I love a light gray cardstock no matter what brand it is. For this one, instead of die cutting the cherry blossom branch or any of the individual petals or flowers, we're going to stamp everything directly on the background. That includes our sentiments, our branch, and anything else. This background measures 4 inches by 5¼ inches, meaning it's going to be slightly smaller and have a nice white border all the way around the perimeter of the card when we adhere the panel to the design. I'm again going to stamp with a clear embossing ink and heat emboss with white embossing powder. So very similar to the first card in this respect, except that I have made sure to position the florals right where I want them to go, because we are not going to be doing any die cutting and it's going to be a single layer card. Then I will be coloring in everything with Polychromos colored pencils. Again, choosing colors that I think represent cherry blossoms. The colors I'm using are shown across the bottom of the screen. When I color with Polychromos colored pencils, I always like to lay down, some white first, and then I blend out with my color. In this case, I'm using Pompeian red, medium flesh, and light flesh for the flower petals, but I've already gone in and added a layer of white underneath. I think it helps make the white just not necessarily show through, but it makes the color on top a little more vibrant. It's probably not quite as important on this light gray background as it would be on a darker background. You can always go back in and add additional white on top if you want to as well, especially if you need to lighten it a certain area. Just like I did with the card colored with zigs, I'm going to color the flower buds a little bit deeper and darker, meaning I'm going to use more of the Pompeian red than I used on any of the other designs. Most of the other flowers feature only medium flesh and light flesh with just a tiny bit of Pompeian red here and there. We're using a couple of colors of green. Remember that those leaves are also teeny tiny, so not a ton of coloring and shading goes into that area. And I'm only using one brown pencil to color in stem areas. The Polychromos look amazing on a colored cardstock. The peachy pinks of the cherry blossoms pop on a light gray background. But you could try any background color, including a solid aqua background. I think that would be beautiful as well. I like to keep a pencil sharpener handy to sharpen my pencils often while coloring with colored pencils. It's so important, especially when working in small areas like these images. You'll get much better results when trying to add some of that detail of the flower petals back into the flowers. I tried not to blend out too terrible much because it gives the florals more character to have some of those little lines in each of the flower petals. I'm going to continue coloring. You might notice that I didn't add any of the additional images right off the bat. I ended up going and adding those in later when I decided I definitely was going to do pretty much the same design on all 3 of my cards. If you wanted to, you could always stamp another partial branch using the whole branch kind of off the edge of the card to help frame up your sentiment. I think that would be really beautiful as well. So kind of flip it over and just have it kind of that circular shape of the branch will help frame up your greeting. I made this card a thank you card by adding, again, the just a note sentiment and then thank you for your kindness. I think a note card set created with these sentiments would be so beautiful as well and would make a lovely gift for someone. Coloring with colored pencils is definitely a little bit more work. I don't think it's quite as quick as the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, but it's about the same time as it took me to color with the Copic markers, which I'll be sharing in my next card design. This is a great project to do while maybe you're watching a holiday movie or any kind of movie. It's just kind of holiday season right now when I'm sharing this card, or in an evening or something like that. I always like to have a project like this on hand to do when I'm sitting and watching TV with my kids. Another tip when you're coloring with Polychromos is to take a dry paintbrush and wipe away any colored pencil flakes that might happen while you're coloring. You don't want to smear those across your paper with your hand, as it will leave streaks over the design. Now I'm simply taking the rest of my stamped images and I'm going to just stamp them all at once onto my background and then color these in as well. You can add as many or as few of these extra images as you want to. I even think it would be pretty without any of these extra images. Again, put down a layer of white first and then add in the rest of your color. Now that I've colored a whole bunch of these in with that larger branch image, this went really fast. I kind of assembly line styled it by putting white down, then my dark, Pompeian red, flesh color, light flesh, and then all of the rest. Again, to finish this card, we're going to pop it onto a white side fold card base, and we'll have a nice white border all the way around since it's slightly smaller. We'll finish with some Nuvo crystal drops in Morning Dew, so that this card also has dewdrops all around the design. Because this card is nice and flat, those dewdrops don't stick up very much. This card is super easy to put in the mail. In fact, even the other two cards, which feature foam adhesive, are not so bulky that they'll be hard to mail. I'm a big fan of trying to find ways to create depth and dimension in my card designs that still make them easy enough to put through the mail where you don't have to add extra postage. If you're ever worried about the front of your card sustaining damage, you can place a small piece of that really thin foam or even another piece of cardstock over the front of your card before putting it in a regular envelope, and that should help protect your card. For my final card share today, I'm going to share coloring with Copic markers. One thing that I did different than I usually do with coloring with Copic markers is I used a Lawn Fawn alcohol-friendly ink to color in my design. This is and I want to tell you the right color, Crunchy Leaf alcohol marker friendly ink pad. And this is fairly new from Lawn Fawn. They've got a gray and then they've got this brown. And when I was deciding what color to use, I originally did stamp the branch in black and I did not love it. I felt like it just took away from the beauty of the branch for what I was doing today. And so I looked to see what else do I have. And I thought, let's try the Crunchy Leaf. It's alcohol marker friendly, meaning it's not going to bleed. And maybe the lighter color, that light tan color, will work with the Copic markers enough that the colors of the cherry blossoms will still shine through. And I was so super happy with the results. I absolutely love this branch. So again, I am using marker colors that I kind of tested out some different color combinations, trying to find what I thought looked best for a cherry blossom. And we're using R000, 12, and 14 for the blossoms themselves, YG 21 and 17 for any of the greenery, and E 55 and 57 for the branch. Coloring this in quick and easy. It does take a little bit more work, as I mentioned with the last card. but so worth it. And I hope you guys really love that crunchy leaf outline. If you would like to see me do more cards where I color with Copics using a non-traditional outline color like the brown or the gray, please drop me a comment in the comments down below this video and let me know, because I'm really loving this look and I'm excited to try this out with some other styles of cards and just to see what kind of results we can get. The R14 is definitely a little bit more on the red side, but I think when paired with R12 and R000, which that one has lots of colorless blender in, very, very light, it really works great for adding depth and dimension to those flower petals. Now, just like the first card, we are going to die cut all of the individual elements, and this card is going to go together exactly like the first one, with the exception I'm going to use that light gray background again. The Lawn Fawn Fog cardstock, but this time, instead of using white embossing for the sentiments, I felt like we're not really using white. The other two images all featured white embossed images. This one does not. It has that light brown outline. I felt like it needed a different color for the sentiment than white. And I still wanted it to have pop a little bit, and so I opted this time to use antique gold embossing powder for our sentiment. And this is a birthday card. So 3 completely different occasional cards, all with the same images, all with the same basic design, but all work for completely different occasions. A card design that will work for multiple occasions is always, always my absolute favorite, because it means you can take that basic design, put it all together, and put any sentiment on it, and you have a card for whatever occasion you need a card for. So just very versatile, gorgeous, gorgeous stamp set. I can't say enough about it. It's probably my favorite stamp set from the November 2019 release, just because I think the cherry blossom is stunning. Here's that stamping on our fog gray background using clear embossing ink. This background is like the first one as far as it measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. It's going to go side to side, top to bottom, and completely fill our card front. Antique gold Simon Says stamp embossing powder, which ties in beautifully with the Lawn Fawn crunchy leaf inked outline of the images. If you wanted to, you could always stamp and emboss your images with gold, this antique gold embossing powder, and watercolor them very much like the first card. And I think that would be beautiful as well, to have some gold embossed outline. I will back my images with foam adhesive and pop them up like I did for the first card, so that it gives them a little bit more depth and dimension. The placement of everything on this card is just almost exactly like the first one. We need to make sure and trim off anything hanging off the edges of the card, so those flowers along the bottom edge and the end of the stem along the left side. I like to take long scissors and snip away anything that hangs off the edge. Some of my foam adhesive squares were a little too big for the pieces, so I needed to trim those up as well. We will place this on a white side fold background, add those Nuvo crystal drops in Morning Dew, so this card also has dewdrops, and that's going to finish up all 3 of my cards. Here's a look back at all of the cards. Same exact design, just 3 different coloring mediums and 3 different occasions. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this set of 3 cards featuring the Mama Elephant Cherry Blossom Branch stamps and coordinating dies from the November 2019 release. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Mama Elephant stamps and dies that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel to never miss a card making video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.